Hello, and welcome to the IEA London's YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me, Mark Littlewood, Director General at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Reports over the last few days have suggested that the Chancellor wants to replace cash with a digital currency dubbed Britcoin. The post-Brexit taskforce on innovation, growth and regulatory reform review, to which the IEA has made submissions, and you can see the link in the show notes below, recently called for a digital pound pilot. Rishi Sunak has since insisted that any potential UK central bank digital currency would exist as a complement to cash and bank deposits and not a replacement. But should it exist at all? Proponents of the measure argue that it could cut banking costs for small firms and make it easier for money to be moved around the financial system. Detractors claim that Britcoin could create greater financial instability and make it more difficult for the central bank to have an impact on the economy through monetary policy. They say that it's moving in the direction of authoritarian Chinese Communist Party style dystopia with central banks in charge of all of our transactions. Here to help me make sense of what the hell is going on is comedian, polymath, libertarian, good friend of mine, all-round top guy, Dominic Frisby. Dominic, thanks very much for joining us. How the devil are you doing, sir?
I'm very well, thank you, Mark. And you probably shouldn't mention my comedy in the context of this interview because it will undermine what I have to say. So I stress in this interview, I'm very much serious. I'm wearing my financial writer hat.
Okay, gravely serious throughout. I'm sure I can persuade you to, drop in a couple of comedy nuggets, but we'll see how it goes. Now, Dominic, as you know, I've been trying to get my head around cryptocurrencies for some considerable time. I know that you are a fan as well as something of an expert on them. So just try and explain to me in simple terms before we get into Britcoin as opposed to Bitcoin. What is a cryptocurrency? What is Bitcoin? What are the other types of cryptocurrency for people like me who just cannot get our head around them?
Bitcoin was invented to be cash for the internet. It's really that simple. Cash for the internet. Now, when I say cash, if you imagine you've got a £5 note in your hand and you walk into the newsagent and you pass your £5 directly to the newsagent and you receive whatever it is, 5 newspapers in return or 5 pints of milk or whatever. And that is a direct transaction between you and the newsagent with no middlemen, nothing. It's between you and him. It can be totally private if you want it to be. And we tend to use cash for small transactions, for private transactions, for quick transactions, and so on. And for years, computer programmers had been trying to replicate the cash transaction digitally. And there was no way of doing it without involving some kind of middleman to process the transactions. At which point, so there had been all sorts of experiments with non-political money, but none of them were cash because they all involved a middleman to process the transactions. And as soon as
is that like PayPal or something? I mean,
yeah, PayPal is one example, but PayPal you use US dollars and pounds and so on. There was one called DigiGold. There was another one called DigiCash. DigiGold was gold transactions with the middleman DigiGold processing the transactions and making sure that they had taken place and so on. DigiGold eventually was closed down by the US authorities because it became a huge money laundering vehicle in the noughties. Quite a good story. But if you want to go into detail, the reason why it wasn't possible to do it on the internet was if, for example, I send you a video or a picture or a text message, whatever, effectively I'm sending you a bit of computer code. If I was sending you cash over the internet, I would be sending you a bit of computer code. But you can copy and paste that computer code and send it to a million different people if you like. At which point, if you can do that with money, then it very quickly loses its value. So there had to be a way, it was known as the problem of double spending. And computer programmers had been wrestling with it for decades to the point at which they concluded there was no solution. And then Satoshi Nakamoto came along in 2008 with his blockchain, which is effectively a distributed ledger. And this solved the problem of having no middleman. It was a distributed database, basically, that processes all the transactions. So this was the breakthrough. And finally, with Bitcoin, we had cash for the internet. And so
because
hopefully
the
that
problem was scarcity. Have I got that right? That was the key thing.
Well, that was another
scarcity.
part of Bitcoin's design. Is unlike fiat money, which is inherently inflationary, there's no limit to how much governments can create, as we are now living through now. Bitcoin is limited to a fixed supply of 20 million coins, but each coin is divisible to 8 decimal places. So it's almost infinitely divisible, but the actual supply is fixed. And again, you know, Bitcoin was invented in reaction to the money printing of 2008, and he wanted, you know, the banks being bailed out and so on. And Nakamoto wanted a transparent inflation. You know, the amount of coins that is created is transparent, set in the rules, available for all to see, and not to be able to be changed on the whims of some central banker or finance minister.
Got it. Now, the other thing I want to understand about this, so I can understand the problems that have been overcome. If you like, scarcity is built into the system. So we know if you've bought a Bitcoin, you know, they're not going to suddenly be another 100 million created. But intrinsically, what is it? And this is the bit that I struggle to get my head around. I'm rather with you that fiat currency, sterling, dollars, and the rest, well, I mean, they're going to fall in value. They've fallen in their purchasing power a lot over our lifetime. But if I put a load of £10 notes under my bed, I might not be able to buy as many pints of beer in a year's time, but I'll be able to buy a reasonable number. Similarly, gold, I mean, that's a relatively scarce resource. Or I guess I could invest in bottles of wine or stocks and shares. That's a share of a company. What is this Bitcoin thing that's been magicked out of nowhere? I get that governments magic money out of nowhere, but there's no sort of value to it. So why would I want one?
Well, its value is set by the market, and if the market thinks it's valueless, then its price will go to zero or close to zero. The market clearly thinks it isn't valueless, and so, you know, the market sets the price. It's very much a product of the free market, and I think the problem that a lot of people have getting their heads around is this idea, like, you know, gold has value. We can see this ounce of gold. I've got an ounce of gold in my hand. You know, I've got a Krugerrand or whatever it is. You know, that's money. It's always been money. It's always had value. Well, Bitcoin was designed to be digital gold. Now, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And it's sold, like, one of the reasons the digital economy has grown at such incredible rates over the last 30, 40 years is that instant replicability. If you think in the old days, if you wanted to make a cassette tape of a record, you know, and you wanted to make 20 copies, you'd have to have 20 cassette recorders. Well, with digital, you can just copy and paste it to send it to 20 people. And that process of instant replicability has happened at an economic level. You know, if I want to make 100 cars, I've got to print 100 cars and not print them, sorry, you know, have a factory and distribute the cars, and it's a nightmare. Whereas if I invent a brilliant app, I can just upload it to the App Store and it can be downloaded 1 billion times. So there's a scalability to the digital economy that doesn't exist to the physical economy. And that's why Google and Facebook are able to grow so quickly. And because they grow so quickly, investors get a very quick return on their money. And so there's a self-reinforcing cycle, a virtuous cycle. But one thing there wasn't was digital scarcity. And Bitcoin solved the problem of digital scarcity. So, you know, it wouldn't, you know, it's all very well some old fogey who doesn't understand computers or the digital economy, who's grown up in an analog age, not understanding it. But there are enough people who do understand the digital breakthroughs of the technology for it to be given ascribed market value in the marketplace.
This is really interesting. So let's just say, for sake of argument, when Bitcoin came on stream, did you say it was 2008, Dominic?
Yeah, actually the beginning of 2009. But
at the beginning of 2009,
yeah.
Supposing then I had liquidated my life savings, and let's say that was £100,000 in sterling, and had just said, I love this whole Bitcoin concept. I'm going to buy whatever £100,000 can buy me in Bitcoins. I don't know how many or what share of a Bitcoin that would have been in 2009, but that 100 grand, which it seems to me I foolishly have kept not quite tucked under my bed, but not far off. what would have become of that 100 grand if I'd bought Bitcoins 10 or 11 years ago?
I'm going to get my computer out now, Mark. In the early days of Bitcoin, people didn't buy and sell them. They quite simply mined them on their computers, and let's go down that rabbit hole. Just accept that that's how the system works, and then they would give them to each other. So people gave me Bitcoins to try and get me involved in it back in 2010. But the first agreed on price, if you like, was in, I think it would have been October 2010. There was a guy who went on the internet by the name of New Liberty Standard, and he calculated the Bitcoin price by dividing the amount of Bitcoins he mined on his computer by the amount of electricity his computer consumed. And he arrived at the price of, if memory served me right, I think it was 1,600 Bitcoins to $1. Okay, right. 1,600 Bitcoins to $1. So if you now think a Bitcoin is $40,000, so you do 40,000 times 1,600, that's 64 million. So if you bought £1 worth of Bitcoin, that would now be 64 million pounds. It's even the early adopters have made out even better than people who won the lottery, assuming they didn't sell.
And that was £1. I was speculating if I decided to drop 100,000 in it, I'd be one of the richest men in the world. So
I don't even know what 64 million times £100,000 is, but it's a lot of money.
It would keep me in beer for the rest of my life. I'm pretty confident of that one. Okay, so it's obviously
even at the rate you drink it.
Even at the rate I drink, yeah, maybe not for the rest of my life, but the next few years, I reckon. Okay, I've got it now. That's really, really helpful. Now, moving from Bitcoin to Britcoin, tell me what the Chancellor is speculating might happen here, or what the government might do. What would a UK central bank digital currency be? How would it be different to Bitcoin? What's the R in Britcoin do that makes it different? And should we be warmly welcoming this, or saying this is not a role for the state or the state monetary authorities?
Well, there's a lot. Let me deconstruct that a bit. The first thing is Britcoin would use blockchain technology. And so it would basically be copying the technology that made Bitcoin possible. The difference between Britcoin and Bitcoin is that presumably the Bank of England or one of its agencies would be maintaining the blockchain, rather than it being on a distributed ledger run by millions of computers around the world. It would be a centralized blockchain run by the Bank of England. But nevertheless, it will exploit the same technology. So rather than have an account with the bank, as we currently do, you have a wallet with the Bank of England. And as I'm sure you know, 97% of money is effectively debt, the way it currently works. Whereas this would be it wouldn't be a debt-based system of money. It would be I suppose, for want of a better word, a cash-based system of money. The money wouldn't be debt. You would have your wallet with the central bank, and you get somebody else's wallet address, a bit like their email address, and you paste it into pay in your wallet and send them whatever money you want to send them. And they can similarly, when somebody needs to pay you, you give them your wallet address and they pay you. And it would be probably quicker than a bank. Now, there are actually, the implications of this are quite grave for traditional banks as we know them, and traditional banking, because the more people that use central bank wallets, the role of traditional banking gets sort of bypassed in a way. And we might perhaps within 10 or 15 years, stop using our traditional bank accounts altogether, or, have far less, in the same way that we don't use landlines anymore, except to get internet access. We might all start using our central bank wallets instead to send and receive payments. It'll probably be quicker. The actual money of itself, I presume one Britcoin will equal £1. And so the value of the money itself, we're still going to carry on with the decline in the value of the purchasing power of money. So that's not going to change. But, there might be technological advances. But then at the same time, for all the criticism that banks have had, and I'm with HSBC, and crikey, they can be slow and cumbersome and awkward and all the rest of it. But actually their app on their phone is really good, and I'm able to make payments really quickly, and HSBC have all sort of rules that they're given. They can't, you know, if you lose a certain amount of money, you can't give it away and so on. I wonder if the Bank of England is going to be able to run bank accounts as well as private banks currently do. That's a question we'll still discover. Where this starts getting really dystopian and worrying is that suddenly the Bank of England will know about every transaction you make. And at the moment, you know, if the Bank of England wants to know what you do with your bank account or the Treasury or the HMRC, they can demand that you send them your bank statements. But and you can go, no, I'm not sending you my bank statements. And you can go and have a court and argue with them about it, and you'll probably end up in jail. But at least in theory, you do have the right to withhold that information, and they can't demand that information from your bank account. In your central bank wallet, they will have immediate real-time access to that information. And one of the breakthroughs, for example, of PAYE, pay as you earn, was that the HMRC or whoever it was at the time, the Inland Revenue, was able to deduct income tax at source. And this will create the scope to deduct more taxes at source. And not just taxes, fines, you know, and I don't even know what we're going to get fined for in the future, but fines will be deducted at source. And then the onus will be on you to go and argue and say, no, actually, I don't owe this money, and try and get it back. And if you think often, you know, you pay money to a utility company or something, how hard it is to get back. So that's one big issue. There's other people are going to have their hands in your wallet, both the information that's in there and the money that's in there. It will be easy for, you know, whoever it is Rishi to distribute furlough money or whatever. That will become instantaneous. That will be very convenient. But let's say one thing you have with programmable money is this will be programmable money. So programs can be built into that money, things you can use it for and things you can't. And I think we're going to see a huge role for money with an expiry date on it. So forget saving. You have to spend this money by a certain date or it disappears. And
again, you could apply that to the furlough scheme, right? This is to get you through the next 6 weeks. If you didn't need it, it expires or whatever. Yeah,
I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, that's a very real use case. You know, another use case might be, you know, there's a financial crisis or there's another pandemic and we need to spend our way out of this. So we're going to put an expiry date on your money. So there's a huge Orwellian implication to that you no longer have control. Another thing they could do is offer different rates of interest. Let's say your social, and by the way, this is going to go hand in hand with the social credit rating scheme that's we thought would take a few years to get here. In fact, it's only taken a couple of weeks. But let's say you have a good social credit score. Well, you get paid a more favorable rate of interest. Let's say you have a bad social credit score, you get a worse rate of interest. So they're working hand in hand, or you'll get more furlough money because of your social credit rating score, and so on and so forth. So it's going to give behavioral economists, and I know you love your behavioral economists, it's going to give them a field day. And, you know, there's also the Ministry of Nudges is just going to be in seventh heaven. So now you sort of think with Britain, fairly hypocritical Britain, you know, there'll be some abuse of it that goes on, but on the whole, we'll sort of muddle through and it won't be too bad. But it raises the potential. It gives the central authority so much power that in the wrong hands, you know, even if benevolence is intended, you know, all sorts of terrible things can be done once the state has this much control of money. So incompetence can reign, but also, you know, Orwellian levels of control and manipulation.
So I get, Dominic, why this is attractive to big state kind of people, even if you say that their initial position is to use this for benevolence. I can get you furlough money faster or more accurately. I can also see how this is a complete dream for the behavioral nudge scientists. You know, we want to know exactly how Mark's, you know, beer money spent at 9 o'clock at night correlates with how many coffees he buys the next morning or whatever it might be. What I'm missing from this equation is why you and I and other ordinary citizens would find this an attractive thing to sign up to. You mentioned maybe HSBC is a bit clunky. I'm with Barclays Bank and Metro Bank. I have 2 current accounts. Yeah, okay, sometimes it can be a bit clunky, but basically I can pay any bill in seconds through a card. And if it's a major transaction, I guess a minute and a half to log on and transfer a few £1,000 if there's something particular I need to buy. So from my point of view, or yours as a private citizen, what is the problem that this is going to solve, which is going to entice us to say, yeah, I can't wait to get my Britcoin wallet?
In other words, people aren't going to sign up for an account.
Well, I mean, I'm asking why they would. From what you've just said to me, I'm not inclined to.
Well, if you, there will be, in the same way that loads of people have gone, I don't want the vaccine. You know, most people have gone, I do want it, but there'll be people who go, no, I don't want it. And they'll, you know, and then if you think of all the pressure that the anti-vaxxers are coming under through nudges and passports and all the rest of it to sign up for this vaccine, they perhaps have had COVID and have got antibodies, they're still being told they have to have the vaccine. You'll see similar nudges going on to entice you to get a wallet. But the biggest one will be simply, you know, if you think we're going into a world of, you know, I think we're going into UBI. I was sort of a fan of UBI because I thought it simplified welfare. And we've actually
be on top of welfare, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we've sort of gone to UBI by the back door of furlough and bounce back loans and all the rest of it, which is sort of adding a complexity to welfare rather than reducing the Anyway, we do seem to be going to UBI of one form or another, even though it's a sort of complex UBI. Well, if you want your UBI money, Mark, you have to get your central bank digital wallet.
Right. And let's have a look at how might they start crowding out the established, I don't know what to call them, independent, private sector, market-orientated cryptocurrencies. Dominic, I mean, I think there's cryptocurrencies have been increasing in value in recent days, but tell me about how China in particular is cracking down on crypto. And is this just a feature of the Chinese Communist Party, or are you expecting the big fist of the state to start coming down on Bitcoin and other similar cryptocurrencies, again, to force people into out of the Bitcoin business and into the Britcoin wallet?
Sure. Well, I'm not the greatest expert on where I am an expert actually is Chinese gold. And I do know that it's built up huge quantities of gold. And probably if you do an audit of all the gold that China's mined and all the gold that China's imported, and then you say 50% of that has ended up in state hands, China's gold holdings are greater than the United States. Right. They haven't declared that because it would be a statement of war, but it's a not very well kept secret that China has designs on global reserve currency status, and having gold holdings to match the United States would be part of that. So now it wouldn't surprise me if China itself actually owns Bitcoin as well. And China's always, China seems to ban Bitcoin about twice a year. So I'm really not that concerned about it. But what it has done is clamp down on Bitcoin mining. And so I think like 50 or 30 or 40 or 50% of Bitcoin mining that previously took place in China is now gone overseas. A lot of it's going to Texas, funnily enough, ironically enough. So I'm not too concerned about that. But I do know that China is more advanced than we are in terms of its central bank digital currency. And there's been talk of it being gold backed, the renminbi would be gold backed. And there's also talk of them wanting to be able to launch it in time for the 2022 Winter Olympics, which would be next year, because it wants to be able to pay athletes, perhaps their per diems or whatever it is, in CBDC, Chinese CBDC money. So I'm not sure if it'll do that successfully or not, but it's definitely more advanced.
A mere whisker away. I mean, even if it doesn't get that in time, it's right round the corner, right?
Yeah. But and you know, China's quite big on saving face, and if it wasn't working very well, I don't imagine they would implement it.
Okay, and I want to finish up then by asking what your suggested tactics are and arguments for us kind of libertarian-minded people. You've given us a lot to sort of worry about here. If this came in and there would be widespread compliance, because it's the only way you could get whatever you're entitled to from various government schemes. So if you opt out, you'd be sort of opting out of housing benefit and other benefits that you might receive. So that leads me to thinking you're going to advise that we should say, sort of, stop the world, I want to get off, don't go down here. Would that make us sound a bit Luddite? You know, I mean, I can remember back in the day, it still happens a bit now, people sort of saying, oh no, I want to do all my transactions in cash. You know, once you've got a bank account, everybody can work out exactly what you're doing. Once you're doing money, cash in hand, it might even be illegal, but you know, you're avoiding tax, people can't track it. So people might be attracted for cash for that reason. Bank accounts, well, that is a step towards other people being able to monitor, measure what you're doing, notwithstanding what you said about you might be able to prevent the government accessing your bank records if you beat them in court. Isn't Britcoin just another extension of that? So should we be trying to resist it because of all the privacy concerns and the dystopian concerns you've raised? Or should we be trying to say, it's going to come here anyway, what we need to put in place are a whole bunch of checks and balances and privacy rules and copper-bottomed guarantees about how the state will treat the civilians who use it? What's your advice?
Well, there's a lot of questions to answer there. The first thing I'd say is I do think they're inevitable. You know, and governments around the world copy each other, and once a few governments have got it, then other governments will copy each other. So I do think they're inevitable. And you can take, like when I was staying in Edinburgh at the festival last year, or 2 years ago, I was staying underneath the flat I was in was a tattoo parlor, and I became very friendly with the guy who ran the tattoo parlor, who only dealt in cash. He had no mobile phone of any kind, and didn't have a bank account, and he was quite happy. But people like that are
rare indeed.
Rare indeed, and it actually takes quite a lot of willpower and contrarianism to be able to do that. The reality is, for most of us, technology is inevitable, and in the same way that probably gold bugs were saying in 1400, shortly before Caxton brought his printing press along, we should only use gold, you know, paper will never be money. But the fact is, paper became money, and we use checks and paper money and so on. So there's only so much you can do. And in terms of fighting the government and lobbying and campaigning and then saying, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other, we need this check, you know, all that noise needs to happen, and all the free market think tanks need to make sure that government is kept in check as far as is possible. But of course, governments are going to abuse that. But the beauty of this, I'm a great believer in the unintended consequences, is like, Bitcoin's still quite techy. It takes a bit of getting used to the wallet and all the rest of it, and all the other cryptocurrencies likewise. And you tend to find that the under 40s just get it straight away, and the over 50s are like, oh, I'm not sure. And then the 40 to 50s in the middle ground. My friend John Matonis, who's what we call an OG, an original gangster, Bitcoin original gangster. In the UK, we talk about the slip road onto the motorway. Americans use the word on-ramp. And John Matonis says that CBDCs are the on-ramp into cryptocurrencies. They will normalize the use of wallets. Now, it might be programmed that you can't you can't buy Bitcoin with Britcoin or something like that. That's another thing, is with programmable money, they can stop where you can use it. But I'm just going to change tack just for a moment. Cash is totally private. You sacrifice a bit of your privacy for the benefits of a bank account, being able to have your money protected, safely stored, being able to send it over distance. You sacrifice a bit of your privacy for the added benefits of the technology. And I think that dynamic will continue into the central bank digital wallets. You'll sacrifice even more of your privacy, but hopefully you'll win somewhere along the line in terms of convenience. But the technology will get people, they will normalize the use of wallets. So people will go, oh, I'm going to get a Monero wallet, and I'll get a Bitcoin wallet, and I'll get a Decred wallet, and they'll have wallets for all the other coins. And so it will actually normalize the use of apolitical money technology. And that is one of the unintended consequences that I'm rubbing my hands about and giggling, because I hope that will happen.
That sounds fascinating, and quite like, I mean, this would be a bit like it took me ages to get a decent mobile phone, but as soon as I got an iPhone, I suddenly was very relaxed and automatically got an iPad, right? Because I was like, okay, now I'm sort of get what this is about now. And actually turns out it is actually simpler than I thought. And it's got loads of things that I now couldn't do without. I had no idea what an iPad was really until I got the iPhone. And you're suggesting that if you like, Britcoin could be the gateway libertarian drug to all of the private sector currencies, right?
Precisely, it's a gateway drug. My my other half, by the way, is trying to pitch for a new TV game show, which is called Middle-Aged Men versus Google Maps. And but you know, I used to be like all the other comics used to call me Route Master because I knew every route in London, how to get anywhere quickly. And now I don't even bother. I just use Google Maps, and I'm sure all the rest of us do. So, you know, even us men who were proud of our navigational skills have been superseded by tech.
That's the way it
but
goes.
even cabbies with the knowledge, they all use sat navs now. So, you know,
the knowledge doesn't have the value it once had, but
no.
Such is progress. Dominic, thank you. You've brilliantly and lucidly explained one of the most complex but exciting, also slightly scary areas of economics. And thanks so much. I'm a heck of a lot more knowledgeable about this, what it is, what the upsides and the downsides were than I was 30 minutes ago. So I'm really grateful to you, sir, for spending a chunk of your valuable time with me. Always a delight to hear from you. Dominic, thanks very much indeed. Great pleasure. See you very soon, I hope. Thanks to all of you for watching. If you have not yet subscribed to the IEA London YouTube channel, please hit the subscribe box just below, hit the notification bell. And if you've got a few pennies spare, or, you know, we'll take currencies of any type really, then do please consider becoming an IEA online patron. Again, details are in the show notes. My particular thanks to those who have signed up at the VIP level: Timothy Worrell, Nick Heath, James Burns, Eric Keane, Richard Leader, and Mark Edwards. If you've got a few pennies or a few Bitcoins spare, we'd love it if you joined them. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. Over and out.